The Israelis were concerned that the general view of them might be too good, so they decided to just bomb hospitals for no apparent reason. At least that's sort of the ideas you might get if you're simply watching the headlines of Western media. But I think the reality might be somewhere a little bit different. So there was a operation by the IDF together with one of their intelligence agencies for in Kamal Adwan hospital. I think this operation has been happening for a little bit, but now they actually went in and captured people. So I'll go more with the generic info afterwards. But some of the findings of the IDF and later of Eitan Fischberger, which we always like to follow, and he's always quick to jump on and able to find a lot of information about everything. So we'll also be discussing that. Welcome to the Daily Objective, and also welcome James Valian. Hasn't been on in a bit, but I'm happy that he's back. James, well, first of all, anything just general you'd like to tell us about Israel in most recent days, or anything you'd like to start with this operation?
Well, we know, and we've known for so long. We knew before October 7th, frankly, that Hamas used hospitals, used civilian infrastructure, used schools. We knew that before. And now in the last more than a year, I mean, over the last, 14, 15 months, we've seen that in fact that is absolutely true. So hospitals are presumptively military targets. That's the way Hamas wants it. That's Hamas's absolute policy. And with this hospital in northern Gaza, we saw the exact same pattern we've seen with all Israeli attacks. They warned an attack was coming. Get out of the building. Okay, before the attack on the building happened. Okay, so the idea that this is some kind of bloodthirsty attack for no apparent reason, just to slaughter civilians and patients, doctors at a hospital. Apparently, there are no civilian doctors. That's the other thing. Oh, yeah, he may have been an officer who was killed in all this with Hamas, but don't you have medical officers in the U.S. military or the British military? Well, so I guess there's no such thing as a civilian doctor in all of Gaza. But this guy was a real life terrorist, too. No, what they did is they found terrorists as usual, and that's what they were attacking and killing in this Israeli operation. If people haven't gotten into their head that Hamas actually does want casualties on their side and does want the perception of casualties. So here we have an attack on a hospital. We have an attack on a hospital with a prior warning from the IDF about it. Nonetheless, it is evil. It is evil occupying Israelis who are, for no apparent reason other than to hurt their publicity. Whereas you see what the motive is, what Hamas has, is to hurt Israel with the publicity of attacking a hospital. They are the ones with some kind of, at least some explicable motive, if a pretty evil and monstrous motive, but at least they have some explicable motive. As you point out, the motivation that as assigned to Israel is just a racist, anti-Semitic. I guess Israelis just want to kill, doctors and patients in hospitals, is normally how this goes down. And of course, that's the way the media presents it. There is so much anti-Semitism. There is knee-jerk and anti-Semitism, anti-Israeli attitudes in the Western media. On the other hand, what Hamas has done as a matter of policy for quite some time now is completely ignored. That entire context is dropped of what we know Hamas does with hospitals. So what do we have here? We have what is, in fact, the same thing that we've heard again and again and again and again: the West repeating Hamas propaganda, the Western media falling prey to precisely Hamas strategy, being on the side of Hamas, being the, at best, useful idiots, at worst, cooperating Israeli haters among the Western media. That's it. That's my analysis of it.
Someone in the chat says that we should get more non-biased guests on, and I think the idea of bias is very interesting because, in a sense, you could say yes, we are biased. When we look at this conflict, we have a bias towards Western civilization, towards countries that respect property rights, towards countries that respect individual rights. Now, you might say that's not what usually is meant by bias, but when you want to evaluate any situation, you need some values, you need some standard, you need some way to judge the situation. You cannot look at the Israeli-Palestinian conflict with the idea that you have no values. You don't have as many people do. Many people say Palestinians deserve a state, but there are no demands for what kind of state it should be. They just deserve a state. So what is the point of like such an evaluation? Like, you are not doing any judging, you are not doing any evaluation. You are just saying, well, we have two groups here, and one group is doing this and that's something they do, and this other group is doing that and that's something they do. How would you ever evaluate something without bias or without some value standard?
Right. If you didn't care about people getting killed, you wouldn't have a bias for life and a bias against murder. So I freely admit that I walk in with a bias for civilization, a bias for freedom, a bias for the hope that we can have a world where there's peace. But I understand what the real causal agent here is. It's the culture that dominates in the Middle East with these jihadist types, Hezbollah and Hamas and Iran and the Houthis, and you name it, in the Palestinian Authority, you name it. They have bias. They have an ideology. Their Islamic religion is actually a true epistemological bias because they're irrational. And this irrational hatred of all things Jewish and Western and civilized is what is the basis of Hamas. So if you say we shouldn't be so biased, what, should we have people on from Hamas who are biased against civilization? No, I walk in and I will announce my values ahead of time, tell you what my values are. I don't want an endless war. I want the jihadist murderers to be stopped. I want that to end. I know that ideas are what are at the base of all of that. Now, if you think that it's biased that we talk about the hospital, first of all, Israel was accused of attacking a hospital early on in this war when they weren't even the ones responsible for the rockets. And that's bias. Before you even found out about that hospital, what was the name of that hospital again? Daniel, it slips my
Kamal,
mind.
Adwan.
There we go. Israel bombs hospital. Well, Israel did not bomb that hospital. It was an errant Islamic missile that hit the parking lot, the car park outside that hospital, and Israel got the blame. Now, of course, when Israel went into hospitals, what did we find? We found caches of weapons. We found openings to these tunnels. So we know hospitals, in fact, are used by Hamas. We know their strategy, in fact, you'd be biased if you didn't see that Hamas's strategy was to kill their own civilians in order to, because they're all in favor of martyrdom, they're happy to martyr themselves so that they can get the bad press on Israel. What is Israel's motive here? None whatever. What, more bad press, more attacks on hospitals just to say they killed people because they're such bloodthirsty monsters? That's what you'd have to say. There's nothing on the Israeli side ideologically or in fact in any of the evidence so far that suggests any of that, including the fact that we know that before they bombed this hospital or attacked this hospital, they warned the people to get out. If you ignore all that evidence, then you are biased indeed. You're ignoring the facts and you're focusing on what is sheer mysticism, what is sheer arbitrary assertion. Israel just is engaged in a genocide. We're going to stick to the narrative that Israel is engaged in a genocide, therefore they just wantonly attack hospitals and doctors. Well, none of the evidence supports that here. The evidence here supports what we know about lots of other hospitals that were used. There's no such thing as a civilian hospital or a doctor. They're all colonels in Hamas. Okay, there is no distinction between, well, why doesn't Hamas wear uniforms? Why does Hamas use hospitals? They are precisely so that they can get this collateral damage headline against Israel. That's the bias here. Now, am I biased? Yeah, I'm biased in favor of civilization. I'm biased in favor of life. I'm biased in favor of stopping endless wars. Yeah.
Yeah, and so now continuing back to the hospital. First, thank you, Bonnie, for a super chat. Well, just quickly something to mention because someone brought it up in the chat. So this is Kamal Adwan Hospital. Well, the question could be, who is Kamal Adwan? It was a PLO politician who was, according to Israel, was involved with the Black September organization, the one that did the Berlin Olympic. Attack. So yeah, this is the kind of, we name hospitals after I don't know, Washington or Abraham Lincoln in America, and some people name them after terrorists. So it's just
Well,
yeah. Well, I want to move on to the thing. So IDF on X has said that 240 plus Hamas, Islamic Jihad terrorists, and other operatives suspected of terrorist activities were apprehended. Maybe they all got stuffy nose, and just 240 of them were just in a hospital at the same time.
wait a minute.
Approximately.
If it was really a hospital, let's imagine they did all have stuffy noses or some injury or something. Well, that doesn't mean that they're off limits if they're active terrorists there, right? I mean, a terrorist with a stuffy nose is still a terrorist. The point, where are the innocents, though? I mean, they asked everyone to leave the hospital, to leave the area before they attacked the place, but they found 240 terrorists, and they all just happened to be terrorists inside. Okay. Well, doesn't that ever cause the anti-Israeli people to stop and pause and think for a second? No. If Hamas had any sanity and humanity, they would separate their hospitals from their military facilities. Their operatives would wear uniforms. They would just make the distinction. It is on Hamas. It is on Hamas to the extent that they don't do that. But, isn't that funny? The 240 some people in there were all, well, all terrorists. Yeah, and the doctor in charge is a colonel in Hamas. Right, got it.
Yeah, so let's talk about the director of Kamal Adwan Hospital. So the IDF also claims that he's suspected of being a Hamas terrorist operative. So he was taken in for questioning. And also IDF Special Forces conducted precise activities inside the hospital, and they located and confiscated weapons in area, including grenades, guns, munitions, and military equipment. Again, maybe it's just personal property of the people.
Just like with CAT scan machines, X-ray machines, blood testing equipment, the sorts of things you'll find in hospitals are rifles, RPGs, things like that. When I walk into a hospital, the first thing I'm going to see is munitions. No. When I walk into a hospital, the first thing I'm going to see, are those IV, intravenous things that they hang up. I'm going to see X-ray machines. I'm going to see, testing equipment, gurneys. No, I'm not going to see weapons in hospitals, am I? No. In fact, the guy who put the weapons in the hospital is the one who really is engaged in the atrocity here. It's Hamas. When they put weapons in hospitals, they're engaged in an atrocity, forcing and compelling an attack on hospitals, even if there is an innocent person left in the hospital after the IDF has warned everyone to leave that hospital. It's all on Hamas. They did not have to put weapons in those hospitals. In fact, to say that Israel should not attack the hospital is to say Hamas should survive. I want Hamas to live and do more October 7th. So if you're in favor of October 7th, attack Israel. Right. And let's not see, that's not a question of bias. That's a direct logical inference. That's a direct logical inference. If you think hospitals are sacrosanct and should not be attacked ever at all, even if they contain weapons and RPGs and military equipment and hardware and military and terrorists themselves, perfectly healthy terrorists, by the way, themselves hiding out there, shouldn't be attacked because it is a hospital, because that's against international law. You're using international law as a club against Israel to justify the survival of Hamas and the perpetuation of more October 7th. That's all you're doing.
Yeah, and again, it's not even using international law. It's just saying international law and pretty much meaning whatever you want to mean with that.
Whatever you want.
Because James, imagine if me and you are playing Monopoly and we are playing by the rules, but then I start taking money from the bag just randomly, and you're like, "Wait, what are you doing? How can I play if you just keep like adding yourself money? I cannot play." And I'm like, "No, no, no, that's okay. It's just let's keep. You are winning right now, so I have to like I need to do something." And in the same way, international law. That's why I think to large extent, international law is pointless because it's trying to impose rules in a conflict that can only get created when one side says, no, we don't care about any rules. So it's already, but even then, the international law, in similar to the monopoly rules, is not just rules for one side. It's the rules that both sides should follow. So, for example, with something like civilian buildings, the onus is on both sides. Is the side that is defending shouldn't put guns in the hospitals, and and when that happens, the other side should recognize that this is a civilian building and not attack it. But Hamas doesn't do anything like that. They are hiding things in hospitals. They don't have any military. There is nothing. There is no military building that Israel can strike. Everything is hidden behind something else. Similar to Hezbollah in the north. They put rockets inside residential areas. The Hezbollah HQ is in the middle of Beirut. Well, was in the middle of Beirut. So yeah, this is the idea that, and you have to remember that's the reason why they do it, is because when the headlines are being created, it's always Israel attacked hospital. It's never Hamas is in hospitals.
Right. That's exactly the thing. Look, once these rules are, taken out of context, are absurd anyway and are not objective, and it's international BS law anyway, obviously. But obviously, whatever point is behind the rule is being ignored in a one-sided way. Now that's bias. Now that's actual bias. If you say, well, look, this is a hospital and therefore it's evil for Israel to do it, you have to already have the presumption that, well, has Hamas turned it into a military target or no? Well, no, that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter at all. So long as there's any possibility of there being, a hospital being attacked or doctors being killed. Well, no. Then isn't the fault really the original problem with Hamas putting the weapons and terrorists there? Of course it is. And the minute they put the weapons and terrorists there, whatever justification, whatever rationale you had about the rule against hitting hospitals, let's say the international rule is against hitting hospitals. Why is it there? Well, it's there only to help people. It's not there as a munitions dump or a place for officers to meet in the military. No, the minute the bad guy has done that, you've turned it into a military target. They're the ones who have vitiated the reason behind any such rule. And you've got to do that in order to be biased. People out there, if you think we're too biased in favor of Israel, well, I want you to think through the facts now. Israel attacking hospitals is necessary if Hamas is putting weapons and terrorists in hospitals. It's that obvious, ladies and gentlemen. It's that obvious. And just because they're losing doesn't mean that Israel is the bad guy for continuing to win. No, they should wipe out the entire capacity of Hamas to do any further October 7th. Full stop.
Someone in the chat says October 7 is the beginning of and USA is crumbling. Who will you guys hide behind when USA can't do it? So just a reminder that Hezbollah is pretty much unoperational. Assad's regime has fallen. Houthis just got bombed by Israel again. Hamas is almost gone. Iran got bombed the hell out of them to the extent they don't even have defenses. It is literally, and this was without USA's involvement. So the idea that the West is at the biggest problem of the West is we don't have the moral confidence to defend ourselves. Any war that has been conducted by the West, it wasn't lost because we were not strong enough. Afghanistan and the abandoning of Afghanistan wasn't failed because we didn't have the the material ways to like continue fighting. It was because we had absolutely zero moral confidence to actually, we didn't even really have a goal with many of these wars, but even when we did it in the worst possible way. So it's never about It's never, even when you look at Ukraine and Russia, the fact that how much Ukraine, just simply with our weapons, not even with our direct involvement, just with our weapons, is beating what was supposedly the second strongest military in the world. It's never about weapons. It's always about morality. And now with Trump coming into office, well, I don't see him as a moral paragon of virtue or anything like that. I think he, as opposed to Biden or possible what was possible Kamal's presidency, I think he's much more willing to uh, do things at the very least.
Yeah. The West's weakness is moral. It's not technological or military, I can assure you. Look at the, was not a fan of the Iraq war that George Bush launched in the wake of 9/11. But look how quickly the government fell. The United States could take out any government practically on this globe and in short order. In a case like Iraq, boom, really rapidly take out that government. They could do the same in Iran. And frankly, in Afghanistan, but we were working through proxies in Afghanistan. We weren't doing it directly. And so it's the way we fight the war and our expectations after the war. Are we going to actually, like we did at World War II, occupy Japan as long as it takes to reorganize that society so that we can get rid of an evil ideology and regime and set up a different regime with a different culture altogether? No, if you're going to approach a war, you do it that way. And does the West have the power, the wealth, the economic and technological strength, the military strength to do that? Yeah. All of the weakness is moral, pure morality. We fight half-assed wars that are with half-baked ideas, with no, quote, exit strategy, because we don't ever intend to really win the war anyway. You should only start a war that you intend to win. And when you're attacked, like Israel has been constantly, most recent, think of all the attacks. Even since October 7th, how many Hamas rockets, how many Hezbollah missiles, 2 ballistic missile assaults from Iran, how many drone attacks from the Houthis. And yet, little Israel, all on its own, just as you pointed out there, can, in effect, destroy Hezbollah in Lebanon, in effect, decimate the capacities. Although, think about it. Palestinian civilians have to be behind the hostage taking, where they can't even account for the hostages in any kind of negotiation deal. But that's how denuded Hamas has been by Israel. That's how disabled Hezbollah and Iran have been so disabled, the Assad regime simply collapsed altogether. No, I have confidence Israel could take on any one or even multiple of their hostile enemies and win the war. The question is moral courage, the backbone to do it, and to follow through, to have the moral courage to follow through and eliminate the enemy, to eliminate their capacity for hostilities altogether.
Yeah, the idea that Israel or the West is crumbling, as if Israel never had to fight a war on multiple fronts. Oh, do you want the 48, the 67, the 73? What do you need to have a proof? Or America is so powerful that it once had to fight a war on its own soil, but especially now, but back then it wasn't as well as mighty as it is now. Now that it's the greatest nation and the most powerful nation, we don't even talk about the idea that there's going to be people D-daying on California beaches or anything like that. It's just how quickly will USA kick butt of a country on 2 other continents at the same time.
And every time they're tested, like you point out, even the big bad ones that are supposed to be so awesomely powerful, like Russia. Look at what happened in Ukraine, like you pointed out. Turns out they weren't so awesome. And now even they're calling in their Axis friends from North Korea, and they're dying now in the thousands. Ukraine can take territory in Russia and bomb well into the interior to some degree if they're given permission. Now look at that. They're put on a leash by these Westerners that give Ukraine these weapons. We've just given them permission to, a few months ago, to attack in Russia, and look at the effect. Russia is on its heels, and that's part of the reason why the Assad regime fell too. Their friends in Russia couldn't come to their help. They've got their own problem, their own hands full up in Ukraine. So yeah, the Russians were never 10 foot tall either. But these Islamic savages, these backward civilizations, these backward cultures, no, Israel and America would have no problem if they had the moral spine to deal with them properly. And they're the aggressors, they're the racists, they're the ones seeking genocide. They want to wipe out all Jews. It's in their charters. Again, my friends on the bias, there's nothing in the Israeli Constitution or the US Constitution that says wipe out all the infidels, wipe out all the Jews. Well, you'll find plenty of that in the literature of Hamas and Hezbollah and Iran and any other jihadist group. That's what they exist for. The genocide of the Jews, the destruction of civilization, the downfall of America. That's what their aims are. Whereas Israel and America would happily live in peace with Arabs and Muslims if the Arabs and Muslims would happily live in peace with them.
Yeah, and tomorrow on the reality show, we're gonna talk about what the Palestinians think about living together with Israelis. We're gonna go. There is this guy on YouTube. I'm trying to remember his name, but I cannot. But he does like sort of like street interviews, and he did something like asking Gen Z Palestinians what do they think about living with Israelis in a potential one state. I don't think people will be surprised, but make sure to check that out. It's already scheduled. But going back, well, first we have a few super chats. Let me thank Jonathan. Thank you so much. He says Happy New Year, James and Daniel. Yeah, it's just 2 more days, which also reminds me on Tuesday we have the year in review. So we're gonna be looking back at this year and seeing
What a
how it
year.
was. Yeah.
What a year this has been. My
So
God.
Nico says 2024 was the best year since '89. I'm not sure if anybody agrees with him, but it was definitely one hell of a ride this year.
The collapse of the Soviet Empire was headline news of the century, just like the collapse of Nazi Germany 50 years earlier had been headline news. It seems to me, or what was it, 40 years? I'm not sure if I'm getting the decades right. But the point is that the collapse of every totalitarian empire is a wonderful thing. What we're seeing here is something similar, maybe not as great, but something similar in the sense that it's demonstrating Israel once more, Israel's superiority at least, and it's taking a hit. I will agree with Nikos if in fact this results in the overthrow of the Iranian regime as well as the Assad regime. Then I will think we've really made some traction against the evil forces of jihadism in this world.
Well, as I've said many times, Assad's regime's gone. I think you meant like something better in Syria than just a uh,
Yeah, yeah, it would
new.
have to be a step up, an improvement. But I'm not so confident with Syria as I think I have some confidence, at least, that something better in Iran would happen. I think
Mhm.
a great many people in Iran do want something better. And if Iran's leadership went out and they did make a step up, then I would begin to say, yeah, something's improving there. But yeah, the jury is still out on what replaces Assad, right? And there, I'm not quite so confident. Most of those people there, those rebels, do have terrorist backgrounds, jihadist backgrounds. So we still have to see that play out.
Well, I know that some people oftentimes the members of the Pahlavi dynasty are still alive, which I've seen many people like talking about. Well, let's just bring these guys back. And while the pre-Iranian Revolution Iran was definitely, in a sense, step up or was better, it still wasn't ideal. It's not something that should be celebrated, and we shouldn't just want to bring back whatever was in the past. We should always look towards the
Oh,
future. And as someone says about capitalism, that capitalism is like this ideology of the past. No, it's the ideology of the future. We need to still grow up to adopt capitalism or to understand it.
to
Um,
even understand it, it's still, as Ayn Rand put it, an unknown ideal that we've only reached for in the better places. This is true.
And we also have a super chat from Bulmus. Thank you so much. He says, Geneva Convention, more like Geneva suggestion. Uh,
Well, but
Definitely for
that's the thing
Hamas.
about these enforcement mechanisms. Not only does the law change and is fluid and is non-objective, they'll redefine what genocide is just to make sure Israel can be good. Okay, we redefine this as a non-objective law, but there's also no enforcement mechanism. I
Yeah,
mean, international law is law in quotes at best.
yeah. I was thinking about it. James, did you ever, during when you were a prosecutor, did you ever go to the judge? Hey, this is not going good for me. Can we like change the definition of murder? Because like this is really not going my way.
No, you can't do that. You see, that would be a non-objective law. Well, just the way they want to enforce this international quote unquote law against Israel. They have to change definitions. They have to ignore, be one-sided, be unjust in the application of it. And then, of course, there's really no enforcement mechanism anyway. It's law only in the loosest sense of the word.
And we also have a super chat from Roland. Thank you so much. He says, supporting bias for reason, life, and civilization. Definitely. I mean, bias might, I wonder what's the actual definition of bias, because I think when someone says bias, it usually means you have like sort of, basically like you're denying facts just to like really kick it to one side.
It's a distortion of logic
Yeah.
is what's applied. There is no distortion of logic when you defend a value, though, an objective value. And that's the thing. Anytime someone expresses a value, they think it's subjective. If you're one of these relativists or subjectivists out there who thinks that there is no such thing as an objective value, then any presentation of the news is going to be pure bias. But no, there's no epistemological fallacy of being illogical or ignoring evidence when you're expressing an objective value. But having values is enough for people to say, oh, well, you're biased. Yeah, I have strong values. That doesn't mean I'm being biased. I'm being objective, hopefully, about those values. If you can point out some flaw in my logic or some important fact I've overlooked, please do, because that would point out a problem with my mental thinking, my epistemology, as the philosophers call it. You see, the real meaning of bias.
Yeah, and just to, we didn't even, we're pretty much out of time. So let's quickly just run over, and I don't mean literally, over the director of this hospital. So his name is Hussam Abu Safia, and he's a colonel of Hamas. He's a director of the hospital as well as the colonel of Hamas. As I laugh when at some point we learned that UNRWA employees were involved during October 7, and I think someone on the pro-Palestinian side said something like, "Well, what can Palestinians not have a day job? Like, yeah, the Hamas members have a day job."
No, the UN was overtly in favor of the ideology of destroying Israel. The UN, with Western money, mind you, UNRWA, was teaching small Palestinians that it's okay to martyr yourself. It's a good thing to martyr yourself to kill Israelis and Jews. That's what they were taught with UN. So the UN was pro-Hamas in its ideology through UNRWA. And not only that, UNRWA terrorists were working for them. I mean, that is should be absolutely forbidden with any so-called neutral. If it was the Red Cross going in there, and we said, well, Red Cross has got terrorists working among their doctors who will at night shoot people. No, the Red Cross would can them, would get rid of them for the safety of Red Cross, so that Red Cross could go in and not be a target. This is what Hamas does not do. Hamas does not behave like the Red Cross does. We're neutral. We're not going to take sides. We're not going to fight. We're not going to make ideological statements pro or con. This is not the situation with this hospital in Gaza. They're not acting like the Red Cross. They are a military target that must be taken out when they're hiding weapons and they've got 240 terrorists there.
Well, someone confirms something I've said. Someone in the chat says everything you have ever said is a biased opinion, and that's exactly the way. Basically, if you have any values, if you judge anything by values, that makes it biased. That makes it. it's I don't know much. It kind of sounds of Kantianism almost, like yeah, basically because you are able to perceive, then your perception is distorted.
Blind
Because
because we
you
have
have
eyes.
ability to evaluate things based on values, that makes you biased. That makes you unable to actually look at. Yeah, basically, yeah. Because you
Well,
have
look at what they've
values,
done to their
you cannot look
themselves.
at reality.
If they're saying that we must be biased if we have values, then they're saying that they're just biased too. What they're admitting, they're actually not saying anything about us, are they? All they're saying is something about themselves. They have no objective basis. They ignore facts. Their logic is unsound. They're announcing in big neon lights, if all values are subjective, then what you're saying is you have no objective value opinions. Got it. Check. No, I'm not like that. My values are based on facts and sound logic.
Yeah, so let's just wrap up with the director. So just this is what he posted on October 9th, 2023. This says, and they thought their fortresses would protect them from God, but God came upon them from where they did not expect and cast terror into their hearts. You can see the paragliders, so it was clearly about October 7th. Which this is just public information you can easily find. I'm putting into the chat Aitan Fishberger's X thread, so people who are interested can go through it more.
This
But
guy is an evil defender of October 7th. Okay.
at the very least,
At the very least. But the point is that, okay, uh, if you want there to be medical care, then what you better come up with are doctors and nurses who do not have this attitude. If you cared about your own people, if you cared about the children in Gaza, if you cared about sick people in Gaza, if you cared about mothers in Gaza, you would scratch up some doctors who don't have that view if you really cared about them.
and uh, and just something again about the media. So the New York Times has actually published two op-eds by Hassam Abu Safia. Specifically, I'm one of this is the title. I'm one of the last doctors in this hospital in Gaza. I'm begging the world to help, which I think was in the news when it was published. So New York Times has actually published pretty much like a propaganda for Hamas. Good job. And also another article was, I'm a pediatrician in Gaza. Please save us from this horror. So again, they can hide behind, I'm just a director of a hospital, but these people are actually directly involved with Hamas, directly helping Hamas.
I'm a pediatrician who aims for the death of Palestinian children. Would have been the honest, non-subjective headline. The objective headline would have been for him to say, I'm a pediatrician who aims at the death of the children of my own people so that I can blame it on Israel.
Yeah. So just wrapping up, I don't think this topic was anything surprising. It's pretty much what we always see. Israel has to attack a hospital, has to attack a school building because Hamas or other terrorist organizations are hiding there, because also Palestinian Islamic Jihad was involved here. Then the world publishes articles about how Israel attacks hospitals. And no one talks about how Hamas actually hides in those hospitals. But nobody really cares. It's almost as if the point is for Israel to stop attacking, stop defending itself, stop attacking Hamas, stop trying to get rid of Hamas. It's almost as if people want preservation of Hamas into the future.
That is
But
precisely what they want. That is, of course, precisely what they want because they hate Israel. They want more October 7th and they want an endless war there. That's really the only hope of the anti Israel. We're talking about the strength of the West versus these savages. Yeah, their best hope, their only hope is just eking along, reconstituting, and doing more October 7th so that they can win a long, senseless war of attrition against Israel. That is their goal.
yeah, I mean, for people who read The Fountainhead or have seen anything any media almost ever. The point of evil knows it can never destroy the good. The only way evil can persevere is to get sanction of the good. And when you give it the sanction, that's when the evil wins, and that's when evil can only win. That's why morality is important. That's why when it comes to support for Israel, or as I've said yesterday, when it comes to support for capitalism, it's not about the material arguments. It's not about the practical arguments. It's about the morality. As long as selfishness is viewed as evil, Israel can never defend itself, and capitalists can never defend themselves.
Right? That's exactly correct. Self-defense in the military context, or profit, gain in the economic sense, is inherently bad. Any gain, any profit, any improvement of your situation is selfish and evil. Any self-defense in the military context is selfish and evil by that logic. Exactly correct. Philosophy shapes all of this, ladies and gentlemen. There's no option or alternative but to address the deeper philosophical issues. They will condition how you look at it. And if you all are attacking Israel this way, let me suggest you're the ones who are biased because you're ignoring facts because they really don't matter. You've already got it all figured out. You know who the bad guy and the good guy is. You know that Gaza was an open air prison and this is a genocide. Israel's an apartheid state. You got all the concepts, however bizarrely biased and inapplicable they are. You're ignoring all the facts because you've got to work. In fact, you wouldn't even need to worry about the details of the story. You just see hospital bombed, IDF there, full stop. That's all you'd need. No, we need to open the lid and look at the facts. We would be concerned. In fact, we would be concerned if Israel did do an atrocity. But then again, Israel has rules that govern their own soldiers. They would put them in front of military courts and punish them for doing things like that. No, but that's the policy of an organization like Hamas. So what would be criminal for an IDF soldier to do is the overt policy of Hamas. Now, take that as you will, ladies and gentlemen, but bias is when you're ignoring facts like that and simply saying, no, Israel is still the bad guy, no matter what. Let me suggest that's the bias.
And thank you, James, for joining me today. Thank you, everybody, for watching. As I said, we'll be back tomorrow with another episode of the Daily Objective and the reality show. And on the reality show, we'll cover what Palestinian youth say about Israel. And on Tuesday, we'll do year in review. We'll look back on what has happened. So thank you. Make sure to join us then. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and bye-bye.
Be safe.